Hello, everybody, and thank you for tuning in to the Liberty Report. With me today is Daniel McAdams. Good to see you, Daniel.
Good morning, Dr. Paul.
Well, there's quite a few things going on, but I wanted to visit today with you about what's going on in Syria versus Turkey versus United States versus the world. Because there was a story out just a few days ago about our participation and training some troops and sending these troops in to confront whomever, in Syria. And all of a sudden they were captured immediately. There were 54 of them, but we had spent $500 million training them, and we ended up with 54 people to go in and supposedly confront ISIS. But the story was that they got tipped off because they were caught immediately when they stepped across the border, and the challenge was who in the Turkish government might have done that. And then once it became public knowledge, the United States denied. Turkey didn't do it because, they're our friends, and the Turks said they didn't do it. So I don't even know if we'll get to this, but it sort of is an example of some of the problems everybody is facing in this region to figure out who's on whose side.
It's very difficult to unravel. This project was the result of the February agreement between the U.S. and Turkey to begin to, as you say, spend this $500 million to train, I think it was supposed to be about 10,000 rebels. What's interesting is that these people were trained, they were not by and large Syrians, they were bringing in foreign fighters. So the whole idea that this is some sort of a homegrown overthrow of a dictator is totally false on the front. But as you say, they were this first group, it was called Division 60, I believe, or Division 30. They were infiltrated into Syria and immediately were captured. Now McClatchy is the one who broke the story on Monday or Tuesday, I believe. McClatchy has been by and large, I think, the most reliable news service. They've not just spouted the party line like Reuters and AP have. So I would tend to give it more credence that someone in the Turkish government, unhappy with the U.S. train and equip program, tipped off. The reason why the Turks are unhappy about it is the Turks have from the beginning been focused primarily on the overthrow of Assad. Mm-hmm. And the U.S. insists with this program that first you need to go against ISIS, and then we'll worry about Assad. So that's the sort of the origin of the dispute, and it lends sort of what is the motive for them to do this? Well, it's a way of striking back.
And this agreement also meant that the United States would get the use of Incirlik, a base in Turkey, and to make it a shorter trip when they were dropping bombs, which they really don't have permission to do, and of course that's America's involvement. But there was also a story out that since that time there's been quite a few bombs dropped, but we're trying to figure out who the real enemy is. Is it Assad? Is it the Al-Qaeda and Nasra? Or is it the Kurds? So maybe the bombing, which was supposedly controlled by Turkey and United States. But where are these bombs going?
Yeah, they agreed to jointly bomb, but once again you have a fundamental disagreement because Turkey has focused its bombing against the Kurds. And Phil Giraldi, who we've had on the show before, he wrote in the American Conservative today that as of last week, the Turkish Air Force had conducted more than 300 strikes against Kurdish targets versus only 3 against ISIS.
And people have to really understand this in the geography over there because the Kurds are actually in 3 different countries, and that's been a long-standing ordeal, and it's been going on probably, especially since World War I, and the Kurds have always, wanted a homeland. But how that is to be sorted out seems to be made more complicated once you get more people involved. I mean, why should it be so critical for the United States to be involved in this and pretending, oh no, we don't want to bomb the Kurds, because we've tended to be friends with the Kurds when we were fighting Saddam Hussein. And of course they have some control of oil, but this sort of just raises a mess. It's so conflicting because we're aiding the Kurds at the same time. We're best friends with Turkey, and then the Kurds get bombed, and it's almost impossible, I think, to figure it all out. Remember, there was a free Syrian army. Mm-hmm. They were supposed to be our friends. I don't even think they call it that anymore, but there's 3 major groups over there, and I guess it was the Nasra group that was received the information supposedly, and they knew that the troops were coming in there.
And there again is another area of a disagreement between the U.S. and Turkey, because Turkey has been annoyed that the U.S. was so quick to condemn the al-Nusra Front as a terrorist organization, even though they are, by their own admission, the Syrian branch of Al-Qaeda. So Turks believe, and it's probably true, that these are the best fighters against Assad, and therefore the U.S. should not have been so quick to judge Al-Qaeda as an enemy.
Well, you know, in the region, since this has been going on for a long time, we literally declared war, maybe not literally, but almost 4 years ago when we said Assad must go, and that's been our policy. And there's been chaos ever since. There's been a lot of killing, you know, in Syria, and a lot of migration. Immigrants are leaving, and some of them are even finding their way up to Hungary.
Yeah, as of this week, there was a huge group. The first, they were in Macedonia, a huge group, thousands of refugees from Syria, from really the chaos created by the U.S. and its allies in Syria. Everyone who could get out is trying to get out, and you have this big mass of people. They went through Greece to Macedonia, and then up Serbia, and now they're on the doorstep of the EU and Hungary. And it's causing an absolute disaster for the Hungarian government, because on the one hand you have Brussels, the EU, telling the Hungarians, you had better take in these migrants, you've got to take in these refugees, and Hungary says we don't have the resources to do it, what are we going to do? So really the EU, following the US's wrong-headed policies in Syria, is causing its own sort of destruction you know, in places like Hungary.
Are you implying that possibly things are more chaotic there, since we've been in there trying to settle this dispute and solve this problem and bring democracy to Syria and get rid of Assad? It just doesn't seem like our success is all that great.
Well, the whole Syrian prospect and project was brought to us by the people who gave us Libya, which all you have to do is look at Libya these days, and that really is where Syria is headed. Assad is weakening. The prospect of a division is growing all the time, and you'll have a small group of Alawites and Christians, and then you'll have the vast majority of Syria being controlled by Al-Qaeda and ISIS.
Yeah, and I want to see how many different groups we can name, and you bring up some religious groups in Syria. It's a little bit different than the average Arab country. And also Islam is an important issue here too, because Turkey has sort of been a more moderate, but they're also influenced by some radicals too. But we have the Assad faction that's hanging on, trying to hang on to part of his country. And then we have anti-Assad rebel factions, and you could put them in the Al-Qaeda category, and there's 3 groups. We have the Kurdish faction over in the eastern part and southern part of Syria and in part of Turkey. But we also have the United States involved, and now we have the Turkish government involved. And then it even gets more complex like that, because we're close allies with Turkey. We're both NATO. But of course, Turkey wants to be in the EU, but they're not been in there, so that raises a problem. But supposedly we are upright standing citizens of the United Nations. The United Nations gets involved. Then you have another government body, the EU. Could there be any other group there that I missed that might be involved in this mess?
Well, 2 big ones really, Saudi Arabia, which is hand in hand with Turkey, and Israel, which just this past week bombed some Syrian government positions to the advantage of al-Nusra. So Syria, Turkey and Israel are on the same side of this in support of al-Nusra, which is Al-Qaeda.
So what the internationalists look at is they say, well, we've been having such success in Egypt, that went smoothly, and then Libya, of course, we have to figure out all our successes there. As soon as we get hold of all the emails, we'll know how successful it was. So with all these successes, they decided it's time for Assad to go. That was our announced position in August of 2011, so it's four years ago. And just look at all these factions, and the odds of this improving conditions are essentially nil. I don't know if I mentioned, but Russia, of course, is involved too, and the French.
Yeah.
The French have an interest in this area.
And the Iranians, yeah.
So, yeah, that's right. And so far, though, our interference in that region has probably helped Iran more than anybody else, you know, because it got rid of a lot of the enemies of radical Islam of the Iranians. But now it's hard to figure out who's going to really benefit on the long run here, because it is so chaotic. But I do know one group that probably has not been consulted with, that seems to be suffering the most, and that's the people who are paying for the bombs and the airplanes. That's the American people. I mean, do the American people even know what's going on? Do they care? Are they apathetic, or are they kept, is the news media purposely keeping the information from them? But it seems like with this much chaos and this much money involved, I guess the one thing that doesn't get the attention is you don't see a kill list of American soldiers on a daily basis, and maybe that's why the American people say, oh no, this is good. We'll have these smaller wars, and we'll have sanctions and do things that avoids war. But it just looks like there's a powder keg there, and who knows what this might bring.
And in the meantime, 200,000 Syrians have been killed. It's a terrible tragedy. But you ask about the media. This is an important point, and it's very sad and it's very disappointing to admit. But essentially, what happened with Iraq has happened all over again with Syria. The U.S. media are in lockstep with the administration. ISIS is coming to get us. ISIS is on our doorstep. We've got to start bombing, or they're going to attack us. Everyone fell for it, hook, line, and sinker again. It was a huge lie. And here we are. We've made very little progress against the propaganda.
It's not only similar lies, it's almost like the same lies again, the weapons of mass destruction, and we don't ever seem to learn. But someday we're going to have to learn, and it might come with our bankruptcy and we won't be able to afford it. But it is a policy that is not designed for the American people. It's not designed for peace in the world. It's not designed by common sense. It's designed by internationalists who depend on international finance and control and power. They depend on financing coming through the Federal Reserve System and through an arrogant president and Congress that just says, well, just spend the money and things will work out all right. But the basic flaw is that the American people have allowed the government to go along getting involved in entangling alliances, of course, which we had been warned against. And also this warning that we should not have fiat money and that we shouldn't be able to go in debt and print money. So we've avoided that, and we've avoided the advice that we have friends with as many nations who are willing to be friends, at the same time trading with people. Under those circumstances, you don't need troops in 150 countries. You don't need to be arming everybody in the world, and you don't need to come along to Congress and say, well, we need to change the administration to rebuild our military. At the same time, our military is bigger than all the other militaries practically around the whole world. So what we need is a dose of good, honest truth about what's going on and wake up the American people and say enough is enough. Why don't we mind our own business? Why don't we just come home and stay out of the entangling alliances, offer friendship to the countries that want friendship, and get our house in order, have a healthy economy? Maybe then the world would like to emulate us rather than us fighting with them and pretending that we can force ourselves on these people. So I would say the opportunity is there for us. Hopefully we all as Americans will stand up for the cause of liberty and solve some of these problems. Thank you very much for tuning in to the Liberty Report, and come back soon.